Hey, what's up guys? Hope you're all doing well, and I just finished testing the SwiftTech Apogee Drive 2. So this is a CPU water block with a DDC pump attached, and it's a one-of-a-kind piece of water cooling hardware. There is no other CPU water block on the market that has a DDC pump attached, and so if you wanted to do your own custom loop, whether that's in a small case or a big case, you'd have to figure out where to put your own D5 or DDC pump within the case, mounted on fans or radiators or drilled somewhere on the case. With the Apogee Drive 2, you don't need to worry about where to mount the pump at all because it is mounted on the block, making it so much more convenient for planning out your loop. So we're going to look at the thermal results versus the EK D5 pump that I've got here. Something like this is going to be pretty much necessary if you are planning on using the 3900X or what was announced today, the 16-core 3950X. If you are planning on using those CPUs, something like this you should definitely know about because it makes building a custom loop so much easier. Also, it goes without saying that if you are building a micro ATX or an ATX build and you have a lot more volume in your case, you could just go with something like a full-sized EK D5 pump here. Something like the Apogee Drive 2, which although it performs extremely well, spoiler alert, it's not really necessary for those larger builds. Something like this is really going to be handy for small form factor builds where you don't have as much flexibility of larger pumps and where you're actually going to put the pumps. Half of the problem with custom water cooling is trying to work out where to put the pump, where to put the reservoir, and with this, you've got half of the problem solved. The pump is out there, and if you get some quick disconnect leads, you can fill up your full loop without a reservoir as well. Now, AMD are calling the 3950X the first 16-core gaming CPU, and I don't really think that many people are going to be buying that CPU for gaming. I think what they mean is that it's the first 16-core CPU to fit into a mainstream desktop socket. That is, you don't need a high-end desktop motherboard or chipset to run that 16-core CPU. What that also means is that 16-core CPU can be slapped into an ITX motherboard, which is scary and exciting at the same time. In summary, cooling that CPU is not going to be easy, so you can think of this video as a bit of preparation for the 3950X. Also, the RTX 2080 Ti, which we know runs hot in small form factor or even mid-tower cases, it is a very hot GPU, and so one of the big benefits of running a powerful DDC pump on a compact form factor block like this isn't just cooling the CPU, you can easily hook this up to the GPU as well, and you've got enough power to run the whole thing. So the SwiftTech Apogee Drive 2 is not a new product, actually released 7 years ago, back in 2012. There's just no real good reviews out there, if I'm honest, especially on YouTube. Now, despite being somewhat old, it is actually built quite well. Although it does have a very aggressive look to it, I do appreciate that it is just plain black. The logo, by the way, can be swapped out to either blue or green with the included little plastic tabs, or you can do what I did and cut up some white pieces of paper, stick that under there, and then you've now got a white logo. The inlet and outlet ports are G1 quarter fittings, so no problem there, that's quite common. And this is available for both the LGA 1151 and AM4 socket, so the latest Intel and AMD motherboards are supported. In terms of pricing, we are looking at about $140 US, which I believe is pretty fair since you are getting both a CPU water block and a DDC pump and the DDC heatsink as well. So overall, a pretty decent value package. Now, the main point of concern here is how big it is. It's not a low profile sort of pump block that you'd see on an AIO. It is quite a bit taller. With the right angle fittings, it does come a little bit above 72 mils in height. So it's not exactly going to fit in the Ghost S1 or the new sidearm T1. To do that, you'll actually need to rotate the fittings on the Apogee Drive 2 so that the fittings are angled. So with those fittings angled, and then even with a regular right angle fitting, it does fit quite comfortably into the Ghost S1. The total height comes to about 67 millimeters. The pump that they're using here is a DDC pump. It's the MCP35X. I believe it is SwiftTech's own brand pump, and it is powered by a Molex connector and controlled via a 4-pin PWM header. So yes, it is PWM, that's good to see, and the RPM ranges from 1250 RPM all the way up to 4500. So one main point of concern when it comes to water cooling is the pump, and more specifically pump noise. You want this thing to be as quiet as possible, especially in a small form factor case that is extremely well ventilated. You don't have that much noise suppression and noise isolation. In terms of the Apogee Drive 2's noise levels, I'm pretty happy to say that it's pretty much silent at 1250 RPM. It's quiet at around 2000. It's relatively quiet at around 3000, and then it really only starts to get audible at around 3700 to 4000. And then of course at 4500 RPM, it is quite audible. So as I said, I did test this against the D5 pump from EK to see whether there really is a difference in terms of the amount of pressure or flow rate, or I'm not really sure what the metrics are, but I hooked them up to the same loop and basically the results are pretty uneventful because they were pretty much the same. The Apogee Drive 2 is easily able to match the D5 pump, at least with the sort of setup that we've got here on the open test bench. And for those wondering, that was just with a single 280mm EK radiator with the fans spinning at 1100 RPM. The CPU that we're testing here is also an 8700K that's been delitted. It's also been overclocked to 5 GHz and the V-core has been set to 1.36 volts. So really across the board here, there really is not much of a difference, at least for the Apogee Drive 2, it's pretty much solid at even 2200 RPM, and so 4500 RPM is definitely not necessary for a loop this size. For larger loops, there might be a difference, and there might be some benefit of running those higher RPMs, but you know, the main focus of today's video is of small form factor cases, ITX cases. Even in a micro ATX case where you're running a single radiator, I really don't think going above 3000 RPM or even upgrading to a D5 pump is going to be necessary. And this sort of got me wondering, is the Apogee Drive 2 actually overkill? Because it is pretty damn solid. It's able to keep up with a D5 pump at 1200 RPM, which is, as I said, pretty much dead silent. And of course, being overkill is a good thing. I'd love to run this thing at 1200 RPM in an end case and not have this thing making any noise at all, but it also raises questions for further testing. For example, AlphaCool have another low profile block called the iSpare LT Solo, I believe. It's not running a DDC pump, it's running a smaller, weaker pump, hence why it's a low profile block. I believe that comes under 50 mils in height, so it sort of does raise some more questions for further testing. I'd love to compare this now to that block, because if we could potentially get away with a smaller pump block there, then why not? But for now, the testing really shows that the Apogee Drive 2 is seriously capable. It's really powerful, it's dead quiet at 2000 RPM and below, and at least with a single radiator custom loop, it can keep up with the best pumps on the market. If you are planning a custom loop in the NZXT H200, the NCASE M1, the Ghost S1, the Chimera Cerberus or Cerberus X, this is super handy, because in those cases you don't really want to worry about mounting another D5 or a DDC pump somewhere else in the case and then worry about routing the tubes to that pump. It's so much more convenient to have the pump integrated on the block like we have here. And so this kind of kicks off a bit of water cooling content for the channel, because it has been lacking quite a bit. It is something that I want to get more involved in, especially in ITX cases. Something like this really does make water cooling a lot less of a headache. So consider this a bit of prep for the 3900X and the 3950X. I really think that air cooling is not going to be possible for those two CPUs. Water cooling is pretty much a must. It's kind of too early to start speculating about CPU thermals at this point, of course. We're a month ahead of even getting the CPUs in hand. But of course, for a 12 core and a 16 core CPU, you would have to expect quite a lot of heat. In closing, I absolutely can recommend the Apogee Drive 2. It's an awesome piece of hardware which absolutely deserves a lot more recognition for what it is. And if you are interested in buying one, I will leave links down below in the description. As always guys, a huge thanks for watching. Consider subscribing down below if you haven't already, and I will see you all in the next one.